You have questions, we have answers. This is Jane Miller.
And this is Ken Miller. Welcome to our show, all about real estate with Ken and Jane. Well, today's topic, Jane, is going to be whether to rent versus buy. A lot of our listeners and a lot of our audience have asked the common question, which is, should I rent or should I buy? And a lot of people's hesitation with buying is, well, the house prices are high, the interest rates went up. Isn't there some consideration that possibly perhaps renting is a better option? So for today's show, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of renting versus buying. And again, everybody's situation is unique, so there's not one rule that fits all. And that's part of our discussion. Comes into the lifestyle. So let's talk about the renters first of all. One of the first pros for renting is it gives you flexibility. And when I say flexibility, I don't mean the stretching flexibility you get from going to the gym. I meant it gives you the flexibility where you can literally, at the end of the lease term, you can just pack up and leave. So if your lifestyle is such or your job is such that one year you're going to be in New Jersey, but the next year you might want to go to California, or you have a job that you're relocating every year or so, then in all likelihood it doesn't make sense to buy a home because usually you're going to be moving and removing, and then buying a home and then having to sell a home within a very short period of time. You have a lot of closing costs. You have a lot of expense, in acquiring the home with the home inspection, the mortgage costs, the attorney fees. So if you're going to buy and sell on a regular basis, even though real estate is a profitable over time, if you're going to do short-term buying and selling of your principal residence, unless you're really, really lucky, you're most likely going to lose money. So if flexibility is key to you, renting is usually viewed as a better alternative compared to buying.
Yeah, when you talk about flexibility, Ken, let me to think another word is try before you buy, right? I think it's really like you said, people now, the job situation is much more changed rapidly compared with the 10, 20, 30 years ago. Used to be like your dad or my dad, they work for one company a whole life long, right? Rarely they change their position. Now, the life has changed so rapidly. So if you're not sure what's going to happen in the near future, like you said, if it's 3 years, 2 years, 5 years, and renting does give you the flexibility. And for those people, they may want to change their lifestyle. Say, I had a client, right? She had a house in New Jersey, and her husband passed away. So that time, she wanted to sell her house, which I totally understand. I said, after you live together so many years, and you want to make a change, especially now she's older age, her income is very restricted to the retirement income. So, and she read something on the magazine said Austin, Texas is the number one place to live. So without doing any further investigation, she wants to go and buy a place. But, I told her, I said, how do you know you're going to like it, right? Why don't you just go there? Oh, I did. I went there for vacation. I said, their vacation for 10 days is very different. You're going to live there 12 months or 10 months in a year, right? Mm-hmm. But why don't you just rent there for a year and see? And also you could, Austin is a huge place. So you don't know which community, which area going to suit you more. Why don't you go there rent? At the end, she said, yeah, you're right. So she went there rent. And a year and a half later, she called me. She said, I'm back in Jersey now. I said, what happened? Yeah. She said, oh, the place is beautiful, Jane, but I'm so lonely. All my friends is here. And her daughter work in New York City, so live in New York City. So at the end, after a year and a half, almost 2 years, and she came back. So that's really, thank God, she didn't buy. Otherwise, in a year and a half, unless you see dramatic increase in value, that's going to cost you just in and out, right? So that's why it's always good to rent to see whether you like the community, whether you like the area before you buy.
Absolutely, and that's just one of several cases you had. I think you had a client in East Brunswick that had a very similar experience. That sold their house in East Brunswick. They moved to a community, I think, an adult community or down the shore.
Down the shore.
They thought that would be their perfect backdrop, but after a while they missed. I guess
they didn't like it because at that time the club she went, but it's like she found very hard to fit in that community because they speak a different language and they all have a friend circle. Very hard for her to get in. And then she moved to another township. From there, she moved to Monroe and moved to another area. But once again, she felt the association has a very strict rules, and she didn't like it. So, and then she moved back to East Brunswick, like 10 years between first for the shore and then to Monroe and then back to East Brunswick. She bought a ranch.
Oh, so she went back. So she basically went from a two-story house originally in East Brunswick, did the shore route, did the adult community route in Monroe, and then circled back to East Brunswick and ended up in a ranch. But sometimes that's what people have to do. They have to experience it because even though, from a third-party standpoint, you can say to them that it doesn't make sense where you're moving, but they look at it as like, oh, it's such a great place down here, but they don't realize by being separated by that, if it's further away than their normal community, if it's a significant distance, they don't realize that being, having the distance to travel to see friends and family is, it becomes an issue. So they realize after they settle in the new place, after the joy or the excitement of the environment wears off, they get lonely. They miss their friends. They miss their family. That happened with my parents too. They had moved, down by the shore, but most of the family is in Central Jersey. So the drive became driving and the commuting back and forth became too burdensome. So they decided to eventually move back. So,
but the only difference is they bought 2005, 2006.
Right.
When we moved back, it's like lost almost 30%, 40% of the cost. So I mean, almost 50% is gone plus the closing cost.
Right.
Almost half of the value of the home's gone by doing that exercise.
Right.
Yes.
So that brings up another advantage of renting is that you have a lower initial cost. Usually, if you rent, you need a month and a half by law. That's the maximum you can be charged in New Jersey for your security deposit. You just need a month and a half's rent, and usually you pay the first month's rent in advance. Versus if you're buying a house, you need a significant amount more of cash, certainly for the down payment, whether it's the conventional loan of 20%.
No, it can be 5%.
Or lower, but now it can be as low as 5%.
3.5.
Right, or 3.5. But you also need other costs for the attorney's fees, for the home inspection, and title insurance.
Title insurance.
Right, and then you have an ongoing cost not only for the mortgage, but the third point is the responsibility. As renting, you have limited responsibility. You're really not responsible unless you break something, and if you live in an apartment unit, you're maybe responsible for certain repairs on the inside, or if you rent a house, likewise you may be responsible for limited repairs, but not the major repairs. Versus if you own a home, besides having the ongoing commitment to pay your taxes, pay your mortgage, those additional costs, you're responsible for usually all the upkeep. Whether it be the lawn maintenance, the landscaping, snow removal. Painting, if the furnace breaks, the air conditioner breaks. So there's a lot of considerations that go into home ownership.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing. And that all ties in. Another pro is that with renting, you have a predictable expense, whereas with home ownership, you have a semi-predictable expense because certain things are fixed, but there are other unexpected surprises that could come up, as we covered in the past with the home ownership. So those are kind of the pros, and I guess in a nutshell, are your monthly cost is your rent. You have the flexibility that, hey, when the lease term ends, if I don't like it here, I'm not glued here, and I don't have to wait. Whereas if you don't like a house you're in, you can get out of the house, you can sell it, but then you're selling it. You don't know what the market's going to be, and if you haven't lived there much time, you're likely going to lose money on the sale. Mm-hmm. So those are some things. So let's talk about some of the disadvantages, some of the cons of renting. So renting, unfortunately, doesn't build any equity. You're not building. Whereas if you own a home, if you pay cash, obviously you have the equity built in, or if you have a mortgage, you have some equity for your cash component, but every month or every mortgage payment, shall we say, you're building a slight amount of equity in that the part of the mortgage payoff is going towards principal, and certainly a lot of it is going towards interest, but you are building some equity in the real estate. Whereas with rent, you're really just throwing the money is going into the landlord's pocket, and there's no equity.
Yeah, I had a very, very good client, right? I met them 15 years ago. And at that time, I helped them to rent a condo in East Brunswick. And the landlord is very nice. Believe it or not, the landlord never increased his rent for 14 years straight, which has never happened, right?
That's
14 years, the landlord never, ever increase the rent. So the condo was in a very good condition when they rented, but the landlord never increased the rent because they're very good tenant. They pay on time like a clock. They really rarely to call the landlord. I remember I think once there was fridge broke. So that was in the winter. The landlord was overseas, so I helped him bought a fridge delivered. It was like because they had a young baby that time. So 14 years, zero increase. So they paying the rent is so low, and your glass will drop, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is if the landlord keep increase the rent, and if they uncomfortable there, they would have bought a house a long time ago. Think about 14 years or even 10 years ago, if they bought a house $500,000 that time, today easily you will get for $800 or more. So, but they rented all this time. Now the landlord want to retire, had to sell the condo, and they had to move. Now the rent is so high now. So at the end, they cannot buy a house because the interest rate goes so high. They can't buy a house because really, from their perspective, it's not worth it. They could have the same house 3 years ago, 30% lower, 40% lower. So therefore, they just mentally, they can't overcome that. So they decided to continue to rent, wait till the price go down. Right. I mean, we don't know how long, but it's $3,000 for rent.
That brings up an interesting question we're going to tackle right after the break about, renting versus buying. If you're renting, can you time the market so you can calculate it, or are you really chasing, is it really a dog chasing its tail because you're never going to catch the market? So we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back to discuss that and more right after these messages. Okay, welcome back to our show. We're discussing the pros and cons of renting versus buying. And just before the break, Jane, you were discussing that you had a client that rented for a long period of time, I think 14 years. And it's in all likelihood they could have afforded to buy a home maybe 7 or 8 years into the rental, but instead they waited because the landlord had a very good relationship with them and did not once increase the rent. But now they find themselves in the predicament where the home price the last few years in New Jersey have gone up steadily, and not only have gone up, but now with the rising interest rates, they're saying, gee, I should have bought 3-4 years ago when the prices were, lower and the interest rates were at a godsend at, a steal at, 2.75, 3% or whatever, where now they're at 6-7%, so it's crazy. So that begs the question. A lot of people that are renting are probably listening saying, you know what, I'm renting, I'm thinking, gee, I don't want to buy now because the housing market's going to crash. It's almost like saying, you're on the sidelines with the cash and you want to buy a stock, but you're afraid that you're calculating, thinking that the stock market is going to crash. But the problem with that attitude or that mindset is that you're banking on that the housing market will go down and that you're going to be in the position to catch it, and it may or it may not. But usually over time, real estate appreciates. It may have dips in the market prices and the interest rates. I mean, nobody can predict the interest rates.
You always can refinance. That
you always
interest
refinance.
Rate is easier to be, can be managed through the refinance process.
So is there really ever a bad time? If you can afford it, I guess the question becomes, is there a bad time to, assuming that the renters are in the position where they have a job, they have a family, they know they want to settle in a certain area, and they can afford the mortgage payment, as where in some cases it used to be in some cases when the interest rates were ungodly low, that the mortgage payment was almost the same as the rental payment, and then it became a situation. Well, gee, why not buy the house, build up equity. Then we're going to talk about some of the other tax advantages you get from the mortgage. But it almost becomes, if you try to calculate, if you try to calculate too much the housing market and think, oh, the prices are really high now, the interest rates are really high, I'm going to wait till the market drops 20%. You may
take a while. It may never happen. You never know because Ken, this market, as you said, right, is unpredictable. So remember during the COVID, and I want to buy some stock because that was low. I thought maybe it's gonna go lower. At the end, it shoot back up. So I missed that. Right. The house market is the same, and we had a very terrible market 2011, 2012. That's because prime mortgage got in trouble, right? Got the country in trouble. That was a greedy Wall Street. But this time, even though the economy may be slowed down, the employment may rise, but I don't think this time the market will go that bad because the banking has been tied up a lot with the mortgage, with the quality of the buyer. So therefore, the default rate should be very manageable. Secondly, even certain buyer lost a job, unfortunately, due to the economy. If they sell the house, they probably, because the price went up, 35% since before the COVID. So they probably can get out even. Rather than foreclose on that. So based on that, I don't see in the next year or so, especially the election is the end of next year. Mm-hmm. It's very unlikely the market have a huge correction right. And within the next 12 months.
And also, thirdly, because of the inventory being so low that the buyers don't have much choice, so that if they don't have much choice, the sellers can maintain the prices are going to stay stable and not go downward.
Yeah, not too much because a little bit of correction, seasonal correction, a little bit of correction here and there, that's definitely understandable. But I don't see personally there got to be huge decrease in the home price at this point.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
After we talk so much pro and cons,
let's talk about now buying.
That's probably just opposite. What if the pro become
right.
con? Whatever the con become pro?
Right. And the last con for renting, which we touched upon, is there's no tax benefit, which begs the question. Then when you buy a home, there are tax benefits. There are real estate property taxes in New Jersey are deductible up to I think it's $10,000. That's based on the federal law that was enacted under President Trump when he was in office. So there is a limit on that, but at least a good portion of that real estate property tax is still deductible. Yeah. The mortgage interest is tax deductible on your principal home. Yeah. So that's another thing. So at least you're paying all that money in mortgage interest is true, but at least you're getting some, a tax write-off on that. So that adds something. And then another good important factor about home ownership is the stability it provides. You know that you're not subject to the whim of the landlord. Because rent we didn't touch on this yet, but if you're renting something from a landlord at the end of the lease term, the landlord can renegotiate the rent. They can increase the rent unless up to it's negotiable, but it depends on the township you're in. You have to check with if the town has any ordinances. Certain towns limit the landlord's rental increase to the consumer price index, known as the CPI. Other towns may have statutes. If there is no law in place, then the landlord can increase the rent, to his or her discretion. I guess as long as it's not, unreasonable, they can't be, then.
Even worse, the landlord may decide to sell the house.
Right, to sell the house or to move back in, which they can, which is a grounds for them not renewing the lease if they choose to move back in. So you don't have with rental, you don't have the stability. In some cases you do if you have a good relation with the landlord, like your client that was there for 14 years and it was a very smooth transaction. But a lot of times you don't have that solid foundation. Whereas if you own your home, you know that you're in that house as long as you choose to be, and as long as you certainly have to pay the mortgage and upkeep the house, but you at least have a little bit more stability and certainty that you control your own future without any extraneous variables from the landlord.
Yeah, I think besides the other tax deduction or these benefit, right? As you said, right? I think home is your life backdrop, right? That's where you raise your family. You can, that's like safety for you and your family, knowing that's yours, right? And you can change certain things. Some, you can,
right.
Doing the different color, different decor. You have a lot of flexibility to do what you want the home to be like, what you backdrop to be.
That's true.
So that's really, and you can make an investment, and then that's yours.
That's right. That's true.
Yeah.
Right. That's,
if you like a molding, if you like hardwood floor rather than the carpet, I mean, if you're renting, I mean, the first of all, landlord have to agree. Secondly, landlord may not agree the cost, right? I had a family rent a townhouse, but the child has the children has the asthma, so they can't have a carpet. At the end, they make agreement with the landlord. They have to pay partially, half of the cost up front, because so that's. But if you own the place, you do whatever you see fits, whatever you can afford. So because that's your home.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So that's basic calculation, whether it's worth it or not worth it. Cannot buy. This is not, you can't quantify it by the mathematically calculate the number is worth it to buy versus to rent.
Right. And some tenants have a very good relationship with their landlord, and they will ask the landlord, and the landlord will say, yes, you can go ahead and you can paint it this color, you can go ahead and remove the carpet, and you can add hardwood floors, but it's going to be at your cost. And the landlord is delighted to allow them to do it as long as they know that the work is done by professionally, and they do a good job. And we do know certain clients that where tenants that are very handy have done that, and they've actually benefited the increase the property value by making all these improvements for the landlord, which is really,
some landlord would be good too. They're waiting to pay for the material. Like we had a tenant, they very handy. They want to do the molding, they want to change the floor. The landlord paid the material, and they did themselves. But once again, most time the landlord wouldn't allow you to do yourself because they want to make sure professionally done. But it just happened that tenant is a contractor, licensed contractor. So they did everything. I had another one. The tenant want to do the landscaping, but once again, his brother-in-law own a landscaping company. Right. So they did the yard is dropped that gorgeous. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. But you're right. But at the end of the day, you can do all these improvements, but as a tenant, you enjoy it. You have the freedom to enjoy it, but then again, it's at the end of the day, it belongs to the landlord. It's the landlord's property. So whereas if you have your home ownership, you can put your own personal touches on the property, and then it's yours. You own it, and you can take pride in it, and then hopefully it'll help appreciate the property, and it further adds value to the house at the time you decide to sell it.
In the long run, they always appreciate, the long run. So far, I can't say 100% well, but based on the history, it seems always increase the value in the long term. Obviously, if you bought a house 2007, you want to sell it 2011, you definitely lost money, right? But if you hold that property, if you bought 2005 and 6, 7, and you hold it today, you still made a profit on that after the selling costs.
So it's very analogous, I think, to the stock market. That if you look at it, the stock market has it's like a sine wave. It has ups and downs, like a wave. But over time, there's an inclination where it's going up, like a graph, maybe on a 45-degree angle or 30-degree angle. But there's a slight increase, even though it's going up and down, and down. But it's still trending upward, and that's
right direction.
Over time, that's the historical, and nobody knows, I guess, what the future holds for everything. But that's the same. That's real estate has proven to be to withstand the test of time in increasing in value over time, and so those are the benefits. Those, in a nutshell, I think, are the benefits of home ownership. That you're building equity in the property, and then hopefully it's also appreciating. So if you paid $400,000 or let's say $400,000 for the house, once you pay it off, you own it, and then hopefully if that's in 10, 20, 30 years from then, the house hopefully went from $400,000, it may have doubled or tripled in value. That's the American dream.
I totally agree with you, Ken. I think the other benefit for me when I bought my house, first house many years ago, is I feel I have to save more. Instead of hang out with a friend, go eat and restaurant and vacations, I have to think it twice because I have this debt over my head. So I always tell myself, pay them off first. So that's definitely helped me with my saving, with how to manage the savings.
Absolutely. So we hope you found this show useful. In the end of the day, the factors to consider are your long-term plans, financial stability, and local housing market conditions when making your decision whether to rent or to buy. We're out of time, Jane. Thank you for your help, and hope everyone has a great weekend. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.